Yeah.
And let me see who else came in. It's Evelyn. All right, we're recording, we're ready to go. And I put this on the module. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I thought I'd talk about it a little bit. This is from last year, almost exactly a year ago, and it's from Smithsonian Magazine. When we were talking about Egypt, I told you about a film that was on Netflix. It was called The Secrets of Saqqara, Saqquara. And this is actually a story written about that particular excavation that they made the biographical, documentary film on. And so anyway, as I say, this field, especially when we're talking about ancient art, there are discoveries all the time. It just keeps happening, and the knowledge base expands almost exponentially every few years. As a matter of fact, I had read this somewhere, an authority on Roman art said that college students taking an art history class would likely know more about Roman art than a PhD would have known 50 years ago, simply because so much has been discovered since then. So, but really, Egypt has gone all out. They're digging up in all kinds of places. And so this is a high-ranking, the Discovery Center's on the tomb of a high-ranking Old Kingdom official. And that's really what this tomb is. And we'd see this. This is what's in the movie. If you ever want to see it, and you got Netflix, I'd recommend it. And what they do in here, you see, this is the entryway, and there are 3 burial chambers in the floor. There are these big stone slabs on the floor, and as what they do with this excavation is that they dig up all 3 of those tombs. And what was interesting, as it said, it's just a high-ranking Old Kingdom official. We think that he was probably a priest, not a pharaoh. So the idea of having an elaborate tomb was not just for pharaohs, but for other people of status, especially in the Old Kingdom. And so in the movie, they talk about all of the pictures here and what they described and so on. And that's partly how they knew he was a priest. And they also knew that this guy who's buried here, Kuwai, had there was some palace intrigue. What I mean by that is that there was some competitive activity between this guy and his brother. And it seems like his brother was the high priest and this guy kind of took over stuff. Anyway, you can see that whole story up here, and it kind of confused the people as they were trying to identify who was in the tombs. But here we go. And it says that the sophisticated techniques for preserving the dead may be 1,000 years older than previously believed. And so here we go. They excavated the mummy in the Saqqara necropolis. We know what a necropolis is. City of the dead. Etruscans did that. A lot of ancient cultures did that. And so anyway, and this burial took place 24th, mid 24th, 25th century BCE. So it's just like 1,000 years before the pyramids, just saying. And so they talk a little bit about what kind of resins and dressings and stuff were employed, because when they dig out the mummies, they actually took them into a lab. We were just talking about labs here a while ago, and it's got to be sterile. It's, you know, they're trying to do DNA analysis. They try to pick pollen out of the cloth and try to identify what kind of plants were the local flora of the time. I mean, it's really quite sophisticated. So anyway, I'm sure this scene that you watch on Twitter is right from that film I was talking about. And they talk about what they learned. And see, this is kind of like after the film, because they were still doing analysis. Salima Ikram. She is a friend of a friend. My friend Sarah Orrell from Truman State University was good friends with Salima. And as a matter of fact, she came to Kirksville and gave lectures every 4 or 5 years. Really very interesting person. And it's really kind of like when she's on those films, I'm like, she's a rock star in Egyptology. Anyway, and so parts of that film ended up being Lost Treasures of Egypt. But like I say, Netflix had kind of bought that and so on. One of the things that they don't say in here, this is really kind of interesting, is that one of the mummies they brought out of those tombs, they went down, they lifted the big stone slab and they dug down about 6, 8 feet. One of the mummies they brought out, it was really strange. They didn't know what it was. And they brought it to the lab and they x-rayed it. And it was a cat. And it was a big cat. That's why they thought it might have been a human, because it was, you know, it was like a lion. And so anyway, it was the first time they'd ever seen that perhaps these Egyptians kept large wild animals as pets. And so anyway, it talks a little bit about that, and you can see there's a lot of hot links in this to get to a lot of this stuff. But at any rate, just saying, if you're interested, and I really kind of like bringing up some more of these things, because I'm thinking maybe some of you guys would actually think about doing some of this as your narrated presentation. So here we go. Got to make sure I got the right share. We're good. And slideshow from, come up, current slide. And so when I talk to you about right after the fall of Rome, and we had those medieval times, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th centuries in Europe, and how life was pretty much, it was hard scramble. It was very Spartan. It was very sustenance. People farmed raise livestock, small villages, and were subject to robbers, plunderers, and Vikings especially that would come in and burn the town down and take anything they had, show you that. And so by the time we get to the Romanesque period, Vikings are gone. They're not coming around anymore. And these monasteries really start to develop their craft in terms of bookmaking, book illustration, doing illustrated manuscripts. And so the kind of thing that we saw earlier, I showed you St. Matthew, and he was depicted 3 different ways, and you would not know that this was the same person, except for maybe that this guy was writing something. But they really start to standardize the images, and they become much more elaborate, much more artful, much more complicated. And so this is from the Abbey at St. Pierre Monastery. St. Mark, folio 53, recto side. Verso recto just means left and right pages. And so we got St. Mark here, and he is in fact confronting a lion. And we're starting to see this kind of standardization of iconography. The Byzantines have been all through this. We're starting to see it here too, partly because they're expanding. They're spreading the information. What we have at this point around the year 1000-ish, 1100, we start to see these monasteries actually expand into establishing some of the great old universities of Europe. They start to actually pull all of the knowledge and learning out of the monasteries, and they basically go public with it, if you will. Knight fighting the dragons. This is an interesting thing. We saw St. George and St. Theodore, and they both had been in legend dragon slayers. And so they're equating these modern day, and see, this is 1115, 1125, modern day knights. This is the age of chivalry. This is the age of knighthood. This is the time when Europe starts to organize. And so we have knights, and they are really the defenders of the kingdom, but they're also among the people that they would send off in crusades as well. And so anyway, the idea of slaying dragons. And so here, this is the nave, the apse, the circular half space. And over here, we have a painted vault, Saint Savine sur Dardiempe. Anyway, what we're starting to see is much more decoration, and where that stuff is, you see it's all painted up here, and we see much more decoration. I was showing you earlier the late medieval, and those churches were very austere, and they were fortresses, and there wasn't much decoration. We start to see the decoration appear, and we're starting to see a little bit of stained glass appear, and that is the 11th century. Christ in majesty. How do we know? Well, look, they're taking some of the same iconography that we saw developed in Byzantine times, right? Christ, the beard, the halo with the cross, offering the blessing. See those two fingers? Enthroned, Christ the King, and the book. He had been prophesied that God would send a Messiah. And so that is the iconography that was developed in the Byzantine era, in the Byzantine Empire. And so Spain, 12th century, we're starting to see this a statue, Virgin and Child. It's called the Morgan Madonna. And you know why? Because this guy owned it, J.P. Morgan. He was one of the robber barons from the 19th century in America. And we're here, Morgan Stanley Investments. Here he is, J.P. Morgan, guy who was a banker, investment broker, basic rich guy from America. In fact, after the Civil War in the United States, there were a number of these people that made tons of money. You hear about their names, they pop up every once in a while. Cornelius Vanderbilt, railroad tycoon, Vanderbilt University, just saying. Rockefeller's 19th century oil tycoon, Carnegie, steel tycoon. So anyway, what happens when these Americans start making all this money, they start sending people over to different parts of the world, and especially Europe, Middle East, North Africa, and they buy up art. And you can see it was a gift of J.P. Morgan, 1916. It's at the Met. And if you go to the Met, you go to the Museum of Modern Art, and even some of the other museums in the U.S., you'll find these are the early robber barons, as they were called. But this kind of continued on. And it continued on where they weren't just buying ancient artifacts. These guys were sending agents over to, like, say, France, and they were buying up Claude Monet paintings and Van Gogh paintings and so on. A lot of French neoclassical paintings, you can Bouguereau and so on. Bottom line, that's why in America, and especially someplace like the Met, they have a lot of these priceless artworks. But talking about Van Gogh, that's probably one of the most treasured paintings of all time. And it's there. Well, no, it's at the Museum of Modern Art, excuse me. But bottom line, it's in America. And you just go to the Art Museum in St. Louis. There's a lot of stuff that was bought by a lot of these. And so we have the Morgan Madonna. That's a name of the donor. So anyway, but this is hand painted wood, but you can see much of the paint has come off, but you can still see little traces of the blue paint. And you can see the hands are broken off the Christ child, but you can still see he could be holding a book. He's probably giving a blessing over here. And check this out. We've been talking about this. Iconography, still having some issues with how to depict Jesus. never really a child because he is God and man, knows he's going to die on a cross, never can make him truly an infant. So we give him this hairline and these facial features, which makes him look like a small adult. But just saying, that's in the 12th century. They're still working this out. But anyway, Speyer Cathedral in Germany, we see it still looks like a fortress, but we're starting to see a lot more windows. We're not seeing a lot of adornment on the outside, but this is your basic Romanesque, long Italian. And I don't have the rest of that. Believe me. Here we go. Romanesque in Italy. Hildegard reveals her vision. Saint Hildegard of Bingen, Germany. And she was one of the mystics of the 10th, 11th century in Germany. And you see here, she's a holy woman, and the abbot is seeking her counsel. But this idea of illuminated manuscripts, they really get it going here. They get more elaborate. Gospels of Henry the Lion. Baptism of Christ from a baptismal font. There's John the Baptist, there's Christ. There he is with the attendants offering a towel when he gets out. Reliquary of Saint Alexander. We talked about what a reliquary is. It's a place to keep relics of Saint Alexander. Italian. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those later. But what you got here, this is begun in 2010. I don't even know my numbers anymore. 1062, 11th century. And so this is starting to have more ornamentation, but this is something that's kind of in its own way theological. And you can see it's really big on geometry. Harder.
Looks like a face.
Looks like a face.
A very surprised face. Those two.
Oh, this is the mouth. Oh, no.
Yeah, yeah, I kind of see that. It's funny.
Well, see, there's a geometry of the human body, too. And in fact, have you guys ever taken drawing classes?
Yes.
They ever teach you how to draw a face using geometry?
No.
And do an oval, and then right through the middle is the eye line. Halfway down from the eye line to the chin is the bottom of the nose. Halfway between that and the chin is the mouth. That's all geometry. And that's kind of the idea here. I don't think they were really looking to make a face out of it, but I'm sure that these Italians at the time would have told you that there is this implicit universal truth in mathematics, and especially in geometry. And that is why this is cut into semicircles. And a lot of times they did some mathematical things. A lot of times what these end up being are semicircles, and then these are actually squares, that the length between the columns is the same distance as the height of the columns. And then they divide this into rectangles and so on. It's all about this idea of a kind of a mathematical order of the universe. And then But up here, there is this fresco. Can't see it very well, but you can tell me who this is. That's Mary. It's got her blue robe. There's Jesus giving us forgiveness. Over here, not sure. That could be anybody, partly because that figure changes from time to time and place to place, usually associated with whoever the church was named after, or the patron saint of the city or cathedral, and so on. Again, a lot of this geometry. It's all over the walls. We're not seeing people, places, and things. We're seeing exercises in mathematical propositions, actually. Creation and temptation of Adam and Eve. This is because it's in the Bible. Creating Adam, bringing in Eve. Eve takes that apple. You'll find this a lot in this iconography. Women, Eve as being responsible for original sin. Adam, oh, just do what she said. She just gave me this, that persists for centuries upon centuries upon centuries. Becomes kind of a theological excuse for maltreatment of women, period. And that last, I'll show you some 19th century art that goes into that. But at any rate, but we're seeing a reemergence of sculpture here. We haven't seen that for a while. It's kind of a lost art. King David. Saint Etienne, Caen, France. And again, we're getting higher. We're getting much more sophisticated in how we build these. And so here's Durham Cathedral. Here's some more illustrated manuscript. Moses expounding the law. And you see, sometimes they play around with time and space a little bit too. So you can have Moses with the 10 Commandments, but you can have Jesus like right behind. The mouth of hell cast into damnation. This is really kind of cool. This will be a theme that will persist. We haven't seen any of that in Byzantine art. The idea of going to hell, punishment for sins. We saw some Last Judgment things. Now we're getting into a part where they're actually going to show you what's going to happen to you if you're a sinner. And so these demons, this is like so interesting. There's Satan himself. So, but all of these hideous, and so the angels, they have the key. These people are locked into hell, and you can see this actually becomes a monster too. Yes,
It looks like a fish.
it does.
You see it.
Absolutely.
It's so beautiful. Never seen anything like it.
Well, one of the things that I try to bring up from time to time in this class is that a lot of things that we see today
in terms, especially in the movies, really have their start in places like this, in illustrated manuscripts and medieval art, the idea of monsters. And so not always a direct line, and a lot of things today don't really have much to do with religion itself. But, you know, when studio people are trying to create, say, what's going to pop out of somebody's chest in Alien, whoa, it's probably going to bear some resemblance to something like this. When you make all of these fantastic monsters and things, when you do it in, say, graphic novels, a lot of that comes right out of this time. So what I want to get to here is this, because this is where Europe is back. Gothic Europe. Let me make sure I got my share. And we're good. Gothic Europe, north of the Alps. Europe is back and ready for action. And again, the map, and you see more in Gothic Europe. More of this is pretty much the Christian part, and the green is the Islamic part. This is a caliphate. As I was saying last time, they had a pontificate, which was the Holy Roman Empire, and the pontiff was the Pope. Caliphate, Islamic ruler, caliph, C-A-L-I-P-H. And so they have kind of similar functions. They're leaders in the religion, in the theology, and they are political leaders too. They are the government. So anyway, this is what we got here. We got the Holy Roman Empire, Spain emerging. Again, Hadrian's Wall still separating England from Scotland. And over here is Wales. So that's what the world looked like around 1200. And so, beginning in 1135 and dedicated in 1144. Now that Europe's back, and they don't really have any external enemies, except that a lot of people want to wage war on, there's this, as Eddie was talking about on Monday, this kind of war between the Christians and the Muslims that was waged in Spain for a long, long time. Mostly, Europe was unperturbed, safe and sound. They could do things without worry of invasion, without worry of collapse. And so they're organized. And this is one of the earliest Gothic churches. And it's in Paris, but at the time it was made, it really wasn't Paris. And you'll see there's a couple of distinct differences between what we saw in Romanesque. Romanesque was still halfway a fortress and not that much adorned. This is adorned to the max. We have the tympanum. All of this is statues and carved, and We have door jamb statues. We have all kinds of ornamentation all around. We have more low relief figures up here. We have this. This is called a rose window, and it is a stained glass window. And you see all of these? Stained glass. And so, yes, right.
So I have a question about, stained glass window, like the design of it. We were talking about, older instruments the other day, and music instrument class, and there was, a design of a loop that had that as the whole piece where the sound comes out.
Mhm.
I had that design. What significance does that design have? Is it just ready? Does it stay
Oh,
over
wow,
something?
I would have to see it, but just as a kind of a blanket statement, much of what you see in design work from this time and for centuries is that oftentimes those designs have some significance, whether it's, let me see.
It's like the design.
Beautiful. I'm not sure if that has any significance, but it sure looks like a rose window to me. Yes.
Yeah, he was talking about the instrument itself and asking where that came from. So I was gonna say that's what it
That is, yes, absolutely. Yeah,
So I was wondering if there was like any sort of religious meaning to it.
well, see the stained glass window, this is always kind of an interesting thing. I got a picture of that here. There. And so,
That's like an optical illusion.
well, it does. And I think that kind of what I was talking about Italian Romanesque, about how they were starting to kind of how should I say this? Start to see mathematical truths as kind of a truth too. So this is all different images, but it creates a design that is symmetrical and balanced. And it's got the central focal point here, which is, in this case, I wish I could get in there a little more. It certainly looks like Madonna and Child. But all of these things, and the Holy Spirit, this is where we start to see the Holy Spirit as a dove right out of scripture. But I think it's more about the mathematical truth. And then inside that structure, then you get the
Yeah, it makes
religious.
sense with the ideology that we were talking about, in general, that once they saw music, it's like a connector to God and things like that.
Yes.
And that the universe is basically balanced by like the God's music. Or just imitations of that, so that makes a lot of sense.
That is.
What
That sounds like a really cool class too. I would like to sit in on that. Because, yeah,
What's the term?
well, yeah, I'm sure. But the ideas are in a lot of things and music. Oh, wow, that was. Art, but music was one of the arts that survived through the Dark Ages in the monasteries, and so I'm trying to remember. There were some Benedictine monks that put together a CD of it was called Chant, and they had these Gregorian chants and things. Oh, you know what I'm talking about? It's music. Yes, and so yeah.
like art is so interconnected, music interconnected with spiritual, with the religious practice. Absolutely. And I want to point out, I said, talk about this idea of the Holy Spirit being here. We see these too. You see that little thing where I got my hand up there? Fleur de lis. You ever see that before? It's on the St. Louis flag. I think I might have some.
St. Louis has a flag.
Yeah,
Really? Like its own thing.
it's red. It's got a white and blue curved line from the upper left and the lower left side. About a quarter of a way in center has a yellow disc with a blue fleur de lis and a central. There it is.
This is a France thing.
It is a France thing.
You guess.
Good call, partner. Absolutely. So this is all pretty complex too in its own way. Fleur de lis, what happens in Christianity in France is that they pretty much adopt the Madonna, Virgin Mary, Mother of Christ, as their patron saint. She becomes the most important figure next to Christ himself. But they develop sort of a worship of the Virgin Mary. And so that's not anything new. We've seen that in the Madonna and Child all the way from Byzantine time, but when we see it in France in the 12th century, they have a metaphor for the Virgin Mary, and that she is the white lily because she's pure. And that's what this white lily symbolizes, is pureness and beauty. And so that in its way develops into this fleur de lis, the lily flower, and becomes not only the symbol for the Virgin, it becomes the symbol of France. And so we see this here in the 12th century. Go down to, you've got football fans, New Orleans Saints, fleur de lis on the helmets, because they're from Louisiana. This is a former French territory. And as a matter of fact, the French are so nationalistic. And I just found this out, like about 20 years ago. If you were born in a former territory that France held, which is like here, Missouri, Louisiana Purchase, this was all French. St. Louis was a French trading post before the Louisiana Purchase. We got Pierre Laclede's Landing. We got Choteau Avenue. It's all of these named after these French who settled here 250 years ago. Bottom line, if you were born in a French territory, you can apply and you're guaranteed French citizenship. So if you guys, Austin, I'm sorry you left out of this one, but if you were born here, you can go to the embassy and they'll give you French citizenship. And why was that such a big deal? How did I know that? That came up when Bill Clinton was president. He was born in Arkansas, which was part of the Louisiana Purchase. And they were saying that when he left office as president of the United States, he could go down to the embassy, get French citizenship, and get elected as president of France. In theory, he never did it, but that's how I found out about it. Bottom line, French.
So this is the cathedral. Saint Denis. And they got a whole film on this on Khan Academy. I don't know what, I don't have my watch. It's 5:49. I don't have enough time to run through this. You can look at this. Abbot Sujet. Looks like sugar, but it's Sujet. He was the guy that designed this. And I looked him up too. Because I'm always digging around. I saw that they're referring to him more now as a French statesman. But he was a member of the clergy, but then again, too, I was telling you about how the royalty in medieval times and in Gothic times, they would send their sons and daughters to do different things. One would be the heir to the throne. Others would go to monasteries and join an order of monks or nuns, and others would be other kinds of supervisors, dukes and earls, so on, marquis. Anyway, bottom line, Abbot Sujet, and the title refers to a religious rank, that he is a monk, but he designed this. And here is Saint Denis. So Carter, you got a pretty keen eye. What's with this picture?
Looks like a fountain of blood.
Oh, right here. It sure is. And over here, there's a sculpture painting.
Kind of looks like he's like that person's holding a baby, but it's just a giant head.
Yeah, let me tell you a story. Saint Denis. Saint Denis was an early Christian in what was Gaul, France, during the Roman occupation, when Christianity was outlawed. Saint Denis, like a lot of saints from the early Christian church, were martyred for their beliefs. And that was the case with Saint Denis. He was a Christian. He would not denounce his religion. The Romans beheaded him. Means that somebody took their sword out, cut his head off. And what happened next was that Saint Denis picked up his head and walked away. You see the angels here that are accompanying him. And you see he was made a bishop of Paris. But look, he's got his head. And so what he did was walk away, and he walked like some 15 miles. And he sat under a tree with his head in his hands, and he died. And so everybody saw this as a religious omen that this was an act of God. It was truly proved that Denis was a saint. And so this is how he's depicted. And I think I got this. No, I don't. Darn.
I got too many things. Anyway, he's buried in this cathedral. They buried him where he died. And then 800 years later, they built Saint Denis on that site, and he's in here, he's buried. And it's a sarcophagus, and it's a sarcophagus with his likeness on top of the sarcophagus, much like we saw in Etruscan times. And so anyway, that's Saint Denis. But Abbot Suger, here's Saint Denis. Abbot Suger wrote extensively. As I said, these royals, these upper class people were highly educated and very literate. He was actually involved in the design and the architecture of Saint Denis, the cathedral. And he opened this up with more stained glass than had ever been seen before. Of course, in Romanesque times, they wouldn't do anything like that because invaders would kind of knock out the windows and burn the place down. But he equated in his writings that light was sacred. Light was a symbol of God. As a matter of fact, he's kind of taken some of the iconography that he had seen previously. When I asked you guys to write about the Madonna and Child enthroned with Saint George and Saint Theodore, and then you saw that hand on top and you saw light coming in, that light was divine. And he saw the divine, and he said these cathedrals should not be dark. We should open this up as much as possible, which is what they did. They put as many stained windows as possible. And I got some more, and that caught on. I'll show you. This is in Chartres, but you see the rose window, and these are called lancettes. So not only do you have this, you got stained glass. This whole wall, this whole front wall, this is right above the entryway of this cathedral. And there you go. There's this cathedral at Lyon, and you see not quite as much, but you see some stained glass here, here, there. They let in the light. Lyon Cathedral. And so this is the grand accomplishment of Gothic architecture. This is Notre Dame. This is the one that burned down, as I was saying here, spiritual heart of France, 2020, November 5th, 2020, as we were talking about the other day. But this is where this architecture kind of comes to fruition. I mean, it's everything is developed. It starts with Abbot Suger at Saint Denis. We have Chartres, which is moving towards this ideal of the Gothic cathedral, and see rose windows over much of this, and all of these stained windows, stained glass. And you want to zoom in on this. This was like the biggest and the grandest of all of the Gothic cathedrals. It's right there in the heart of France. And what did we say it was? 1200. So in a matter of, 100 years, they took this idea that began in 1100 of a Gothic religious building, and They added on, they improvised, they invented, and it evolved, and this is it. And I want to show you this here. Not only was this the most elaborate, this was the highest of the Gothic cathedrals as well. And these things here, those are called flying buttresses. And they're basically these architectural devices that kind of help pull some of the weight away from the wall. That's how they could go higher. As I told you before, this whole roof area was made of timber, but they could go higher and higher and higher. So there we go. There's a high Gothic cathedral based on Amiens Cathedral, but this is how they did it. It's got the flying buttresses, the timbers in the roof, and they could go much higher than ever before. And so this is from Notre Dame. Notre Dame, that means the Virgin Mary. Notre means important, like famous. Notoriety comes from that root word, notorious, noted, Notre Dame. And the Dame, obviously, woman. And here she is in all her glory, and she is really becomes the patron of Notre Dame of France. Here's an example of some jam statues. They're on the doorway, the royal portal. Jam royal statues, and I'm not exactly sure who these people are. This is a woman saint. This is a saint with a scroll. Anyway, what we're doing here is iconography. This is kind of an interesting thing too. I want to point this out. Chartres Cathedral, Chartres, France. And this is a stained glass depiction of the people who built Chartres Cathedral. And that had not really been done much at all, not since Egyptian times, where you see pictures of Egyptians doing labor. Laborers, anyway. Chartres Cathedral, look at the adornment, don't leave much of anything unadorned. And so I want to end this here because oops, not that. Assignments. Quiz 4, I want to talk to you about before we leave.
It's 42. 42. No,
Yeah.
thank you, Stace.
42 yeah.
Is 42.
Oh, I'm not gonna grade 42. I can't even think of 42.
Okay, then 520.
All right. Sounds better.
Jeez.
And so what I want you to do for quiz 4, as we talked about in here on Monday, I was going to model this as a way to kind of launch you into your narration or your narrated PowerPoint. And so let me read. In an attached docx or PDF, write a 2 or 3 page essay regarding why and how you chose the subject of your presentation. So that's step 1. What are you going to write about? Yes.
Are Vikings before 1400?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, then I might write that down.
Yeah, we said we looked at them. They didn't have much art other than like the Celtic knots and this Viking ship and Sutton Hoo is you could tie that in. The Stave Cathedral, next page, it shows. Anyway, yeah, 5 days, we're good. And so that's kind of like the first thing you gotta do. Start with step one, choose a work. And the topic of your essay might serve as an argument for making your choice of the subject of you. Oh, I didn't right get that out of there. Of your research, it should be, I'm gonna fix it. Of your, there it is, research. And so anyway, the prompt of the presentation asked you for the factual information, size, name, title, dates, places, whoever made it, if known. And the analysis of the factors which helped you shape the work, that helped shape the work. Power structure, religion, purpose of the work, and so on. However, I don't want you to go that far yet. I want you to write about your personal feelings about the work. Basically, why did you pick this? You might have some ideas that go beyond that, and that's fine. But I want to hear, I want you to pick something. I want you to know why you picked it. Just that simple. Be sure to use all the proper terminology. Good. The essay must be included, at least in part, in the narrated PowerPoint. So at some point, could be your introduction, could be in the middle as a reflection, could be a summary. But I want you to use some of that language that you generate in this 2 to 3 page essay in the presentation. And so, yes.
Sorry, but I don't really understand these directions. They're very confusing. And I've been listening and I still don't understand.
Okay, this essay is about your personal feelings about the work and your
Well, that's
opinion.
not the confusing part. The confusing part is there's
Okay,
mention.
I need to
group.
turn you up a little bit because I can't really hear you very well. Okay, Eddie, continue.
There's a topic of a group regarding this, and is that meant?
No, I don't want you to, I had to get that out of there. This is based on when I was doing group presentations, you're going to do an individual presentation, not with
Okay.
anyone else. And so basically, I want you to pick a work and tell me how you feel about it, whether you think that
Like-
it's mysterious and intriguing.
Like a single work of art?
A work of art, yes.
So it can't
Let
be
me
a
go
culture
back
of,
here. Eddie, let me go back here because this is where it has the answers, I think, to your questions. Come on, there it is. And so this is why I'm asking you to do it, but this is the other requirements. But here, painting, sculpture, or architecture before 1400 in the textbook. And if you want something that's not in the textbook, let me know in advance.
so can I do the Great Pyramids?
Oh, of course. They're all
All right.
over the textbook.
Cool.
And so, yeah.
Sorry, I have no idea how I did that.
I know, that's kind of cool.
Sir,
I
in
know.
case we have any doubt, how can we reach to you?
Okay, repeat that again. I'm getting an echo in here.
In case we have any doubts or
Roll.
queries about the project, how are we gonna contact you? Through a mail?
Yeah, you can go, I'll show you here. This is a really good way to get me, oh. Here. And if you want to write something. See, mine's set differently than yours, but if you want to write something in there, I'll get it.
So you prefer Canvas messages, right?
Okay, say that again.
So you prefer Canvas messages, right?
He's asking you for Canvas messages.
Oh, yeah, Canvas message, that's what I'm saying, yes. Because that show, well, they all show up, I got it all on my phone, so, but a Canvas message. As you can see, it stays there. And doesn't, how should I say? It doesn't go away like some of the email. So this, yeah, this doesn't even have a crash. Oh, I guess it does. I never emptied this out. So Pulkit, there's a lot of things. If you want to, you know, anything before 1400, and if it's not in a textbook, just let me know.
Got a mushroom. Does a mushroom count?
It's not in.
I mean, what about the random mushrooms that I find on trees every day?
Okay, well, if you can back that up, you can do some research, do some carbon dating, can do some,
I don't think I have that.
yeah, I think I'd stick to the artwork.
Maybe I could eat it and then see what happens.
Well,
Random tree mushrooms.
so you guys, have we, let me see. I gotta figure out if you guys are seeing what we're seeing. Yeah, we're good. So we good?
Yes.
Well, then. I guess we're done.
Already?
Thank you.
I know.
Wonder who's CDAH should steal next.
All right. Well, you guys have a good weekend.
You too.
And
Thank
again,
you.
like Pulkit said, hey, you got questions, you can send that to me. We're good. Come on, come on, come on, come on.